But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. Let me tell you about my great God.
Hey guys, Pastor Tim here. Hope you're ready to get your day started off in God's Word. We are in Judges chapter 16, coming up onto the end of the life of Samson. He is, believe it or not, he's a judge of Israel, even though he hasn't quite been acting like a judge. And we kind of see the culmination of his self-centeredness, his selfishness, and definitely his lust come to a peak in this chapter. We get a little snippet at the very beginning that deals with Samson, and once again, with another woman of the Philistines and some trouble there, and he lifts the gate of Gaza, the city of Gaza, and brings it up onto the top of a hill, just showing his feats of strength, all right, even though he was nearly captured. And then we finally meet what probably most people are familiar with, and that is Delilah, actually the only woman mentioned by name that actually is able to ensnare Samson. And what we see happen here is Samson, he plays with sin. All right, and that's kind of the main thing that comes to me from this chapter is the danger of playing with sin, like towing that line, pushing the envelope, so to speak. To my teenagers, if you guys are watching this video, understand it's a dangerous thing to play with sin. What I mean by that is tiptoeing across what we perceive as the line that we cannot cross until that actually becomes sin. Not understanding that sin begins in the heart, the intention and such, as Christ talked about on the Sermon on the Mount. But a lot of times I'll see teenagers, and not just teenagers, but even adults as well. They'll play, or they'll put across what they imagine to be a line that they will not cross. Like, you know what, I'll do this much in regards to this particular sin, but as long as I don't cross this line, I'm fine. All right, I'm still a good Christian. All right, but if you're playing with sin, can you really say you're living like a good Christian? No, you cannot. And Samson definitely wasn't. Understand, the more you play with that line, that so-called line, and granted, understand, we're the ones that are making up that line. God doesn't set out, hey guys, these are specific lines. As long as you get this close to it, then you're fine. No, that is us in our own ignorance making those lines ourselves. Understanding that if we make a line and imagine, hey, as long as we play with it and don't cross it, we're fine. Understand that is a very foolish thing to do. All right, and Samson, each and every lie we see he tell Delilah here in this chapter brings him closer and closer till he finally does cross that supposed line and just tells her where his strength truly lies. And now there's a lot of interesting things we can get out of this chapter and out of this incident itself with Delilah that you're kind of thinking, Samson, what is wrong with you? All right, this woman, obviously, she just goes right out there and says, hey, tell me, what is the secret to your strength that you could be like other men? You know, she's pretty much asking Samson, tell me what your kryptonite is. And he's just freely telling her all these jokes and lies, and he's just playing around about it. Samson, this is the enemy. This is a woman of the enemy of Israel. These guys want to see you die. And you're just freely, oh yeah, let me just play around and might tell her what my kryptonite is, and might not tell her, whatever it may be. Very foolish thing to do. But obviously Samson, who's a very prideful man. Now this is a brief aside for myself. I know some people, I've met many people that believe Samson looked like just an average Joe, saying, no, Samson wasn't this big buff guy because, you know, that's why it was so amazing to everybody that he was so strong that they knew he was empowered by God. I actually subscribe to the thought that Samson was a big buff guy. Now, granted, his acts of strength were far greater than even what we see from like the strong men in today's world. But I like to think that Samson is a really big, strong guy, buff guy, because it just helps fuel his own pride, thinking that, oh, I can handle anything that comes at me because I'm just so big and strong. And look what I have done. And I think that kind of helps fuel his ignorance in these situations, thinking, even if something bad happens, even if anybody comes upon me and tries to kill me, I can handle it just like I've handled all the other situations in the past. Eventually, though, Delilah does trick him, and he eventually does tell her the secret to his strength, you know, his Nazirite vow and not cutting his hair, and she does that. And from that point on, we just see Samson lose, all right? He loses his strength, which sadly he did not realize God was no longer with him because he was so focused on himself. He couldn't even think that, oh, the Spirit is no longer with me. He loses his strength. He loses his his sight. All right, the thing that gets him into so much trouble, into so much sin, his sight, lusting after all the different women in his life. He loses that. He loses his liberty. He's no longer free. He loses his ability to fight for God because now he's enslaved and grinding at a millstone. He does nothing but lose. And guys, understand, that is what happens when you continually reject God and play with sin. Samson was playing with temptation, playing with sin so much that eventually when he crossed that proverbial line, it cost him greatly, and he lost. All right, you will lose things as well if you continue to play with sin and not follow God. And that's what we see happen to Samson here. And eventually, at the end of his life, we all know what happens, where he's able to kill many of the Philistines by bringing down the house. We see him in his only other prayer we see in his whole life. And once again, it's a very selfish prayer. He said that I may avenge my eyes. Not that I can avenge you, Lord. Not that I can do this for you and for God's people. No, that I can avenge my eyes. Give me strength that I can kill all these Philistines here. And so he's once again given a victory like we talked about last chapter, but it seems to be for all the wrong reasons. But God, he overrules that, and he uses this situation to accomplish something for the children of Israel. And it can only be said about Samson's life that he began to deliver the children of Israel from the Philistines. Unlike the other judges before him, he did not completely deliver the children of Israel. Fun fact though, or neat fact, he is at his death able to defeat and slay more Philistines than he did in his entire life. But it's a sad thing that it had to end that way. Once again, the main thing that stood out to me about this chapter is just playing with sin, guys. It's an ignorant thing to do. It's a foolish thing to do, and it leads to nothing but loss. And we see that happen with Samson, and I pray that we do not see that happen in the life of the child of God today as well. Other than that, guys, that's all I got for today's chapter. Tell somebody about your great God. Stay safe, stay healthy. God bless.